really make today's podcast about your really popular one, the Great Menopause Myth. And I said to Karen, well, I can tell you that menopause isn't a myth. We can start there.
So right now it's kind of a tricky title because it's not true. It's false advertising, the menopause myth. It ain't no myth.
Rolling.
Renegades.
Andre and I had this big idea. Mind blowing.
I had to have the people who didn't believe in me.
Between one day and the next, everything changed.
Nurses know how to solve shit.
Renegades. Today we want to talk about that episode, the menopause, the Great Menopause Myth? Like, why was that so popular and so downloaded and kind of just, what was it about that, do you think that just so resonated with so many people? As opposed to, because you do a lot of that kind of material, what was it about that one?
I mean, they just came out with the book, The Great Menopause Myth. And so I was interviewing them about the book, but they have one of the only books that talks about the importance of cycling hormones, which is a very hot topic right now. Everybody wants to know about cycling hormones, and people have it all wrong, what they think is cycling hormones. And so we dove into that piece of it, which I think because everybody's so hot on that topic, everybody was downloading it. To try and find out more information about how they can do that and why would they want to do that.
That sounds like a good place to start. And I know nothing about cycling. I am just like, since the podcast I did with you, I'm just getting into this thing. Like, I've had my period. Went away for 6 months and now it just started. And now I feel like I'm ovulating every day. It's like, what is this thing? Like, I would hump a chair right now. I don't know what is happening.
Well, that's positive. Most women want to feel like they want to hump a chair all the time.
Well, no, it's really sad because like my period disappeared and I'm like, oh, okay. I thought that was it. And then I wasn't as like, didn't have the drive I did. And that was kind of depressing. Yeah. And then it came back and
so
now I feel like I'm stuck, which is
having
fun.
A surge of estrogen.
Yeah. What is cycling as opposed to, why has it gotten so popular? Why is the Great Menopause Myth and what they talk about? What is the popularity?
The Great Menopause Myth is one of the best menopause books I think that's out there. It just came out last year, written by Maria Claps and Kristen Johnson. And I had them on my podcast to talk about it. And why it's so great and why it stands out from all the other books is simply because they dive into the truth about perimenopause and menopause and also the truth about HRT. And when I say the truth, I mean, they're bringing things to the table that nobody else really has in other menopause books. And they talk about the importance of cycling your hormones and the importance of using certain types of hormones. Like, a lot of practitioners are using bias, which is a combination of estradiol and estriol. I would say most practitioners use that, especially in the functional world. They're doing this 80-20 estriol to estradiol, which estriol is our pregnancy estrogen. We never have boatloads of estriol unless we're pregnant. But there was a little tiny bit of research that came out that showed that because estriol is less proliferative, it doesn't sit on the alpha receptor. It sits mainly on the beta receptor. So it's not proliferative. Then it's breast protective. And so they said, oh, wow, we should use this estriol, this very weak form of estrogen in HRT to protect women and their breasts. And this is so much better. And the truth of that is little tiny bit of very flawed research that showed that. And then naturally, your body converts estradiol and estrone down to the estriol for the amount that your body needs, but when it's not pregnant, which is minuscule amounts. Okay. And so your body's going to convert what it needs. And when we're doing these high levels of estriol, it bumps out estradiol. And estradiol is the most important hormone a woman can replace in menopause. And we'll get into why that is.
Okay.
But estriol is too weak. It doesn't have the same benefits on your heart, on your brain, on your bones that estradiol does. And why are we trying to mimic pregnancy in menopausal women?
50.
Why would we do that? And so, and I will add, it was a man that decided on this, which I'm like, that's like telling a man, we're just going to give you DHEA or some other, some precursor or something like that to testosterone. We can't give you the actual testosterone. Like, it's just, and we know now estradiol does not cause breast cancer, period. End of story. There is no doubt in the scientific literature now that estradiol causes breast cancer. There's nothing that proves that.
Like, just stick a pin in it, because what is your take on, like, the reason that they just shut off hormone replacement therapy was because of the flawed bit of research that showed that it was causing cancers. Okay. And then even this, you're talking about another small bit of research that has kind of created the foundation of this. And what do you think that is? I mean, just as an aside, why do they take these little pockets of research and make blanket things that aren't helpful for women? Is it like, is there money involved? Is it like just easier that way because they're keeping it simple? Or is it a cover your ass thing? Like, what's your take?
Because it's all stemming from the WHI and the fear around estradiol. So they thought, oh, well, let's bring in estriol so that we don't have to fear this estradiol, and we're not getting estriol is breast protective, so we're covering our bases here.
Right. All right, that's a simple explanation.
Estradiol doesn't cause breast cancer, so let's scrap this. Let's not try and mimic pregnancy in menopausal women. Hello. And the WHI, that's a whole I mean, we talked about this in the last episode. It was a disaster. And the what they found in it was that progestin caused the increase in breast cancer, and it was minuscule increase. There was an extra one person in every 1,000 that got breast cancer, but it was the progestin group, but they were also using estrogen. And so they just went out with this blanket statement, HRT causes breast cancer. And everybody assumed they ran with it, that estrogen's the devil. It's going to cause breast cancer. When if they actually looked at it, the estradiol only arm of the study had a decrease in breast cancer rates by 30%. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. And with that, all treatments, supplemental cycling, all hormone replacement therapy went out the window, and women were just like, no, come back and see me when it's over.
Yeah, it plummeted around the world. It dropped by like 70% in use, and we went from 4% to 7% of women are now using HRT just in the last year. So this awareness, this menopause awareness, it is working. It's helping. It's gone mainstream. Everybody's talking about it. But even so, 7%.
That's so low.
Clearly, this is not good enough.
No, not even close.
93% suffering.
That's it, right? 93. Yeah. And still, every day, women are going to their doctors and hearing the same information over and over and over again. Like, HRT is going to kill you. It's going to give you cancer. This is still what 95% of medical doctors are telling their patients. It's insane.
Wow.
So going back to the basis of this is, should we not try to mimic Mother Nature as close as possible? I mean, Mother Nature is no stupid woman. She's really smart, and she does everything for purpose.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, some people might say, well, if we're going on that, then, well, Mother Nature is taking away our hormones and sending us into menopause. So is that not natural? And we should just be following that. But we used to die. We used to die at menopause.
Yeah,
she didn't have a plan past that. So if we want to live our vibrant selves for the second half of our life, one of the best ways we can do that is to replace our hormones. And this has been proven over and over again. So if we're going to do this, should we not try to mimic Mother Nature at least as close as possible? And this is the foundation of the Menopause Myth book, is that we should be trying to cycle hormones. We should be using them in a similar manner to how our bodies fluctuate and how we produce progesterone just in the second half of a cycle when we're cycling women. And so should we not try to kind of align with that? And when you start to dig into why does our body do this? It is fascinating. I mean, we all assume that the uterus and this in the 28-day cycle and these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, it's all about fertility. It's about our period. We don't look at it in a positive way. We don't think like, oh, our periods are just a beautiful thing and it's a sign of vitality. But it is. It's the fifth vital sign. And they say this now. It's like the health of your cycle is a vital sign of health overall.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it outside of, hey, this is just a pain in the butt period that happens every month and it's all about just bleeding and we got to try and cover this up, and we're telling our teenage daughters go on birth control, like stop the flow if you can because it's messy, and if you don't have to have it, don't do it, and it's going to give you acne and make you feel crampy and moody, and we've got this stigma around it. And it's like we have to start teaching these young women and teaching ourselves it is far beyond just the menstrual cycle and these ups and downs. Our whole body runs on these circadian rhythms of 24-hour cycles, 28-day cycles, seasonal cycles, and lifetime cycles. We are cyclical people.
Yes.
Tied to everything is driving this, everything.
Ultradian, circadian, and infradian. I had a whiteboard out. I have 3 daughters. And I learned my dad, I remember telling you this during the podcast, because remember I told you, you probably would remember this. As soon as I got my period, I went to a priest who was an expert in the Billings ovulation method. And it was kind of like he took you to a priest, but this is what this guy did. And I learned my cycle and I could time my watch. I'm like, oh, ovulating. My kids, and I gave my kids that gift. They know exactly when they're ovulating. They know how to check their cervical mucus. They know all that stuff. But unfortunately, the limit of my knowledge stops when my period stops. So this is fascinating to me. And you are just speaking common sense porn. I mean, really, we can never mimic Mother Nature. Just, reiterating what you said. But yes, I mean, I always felt so healthy when I could time my watch by my period. That's sort of the healthiest moments in my life. And it just makes sense what you're saying. So how do we do that? What are the different ways? So there's old ways, and now there's this new science, the Great Menopause Myth, that is really tweaking those dials.
Yeah. And even when you look at the cycle and explain it to a woman and a teenage girl, how our sex drive is run by this.
Yeah.
And so many women, I remember when I heard that for the first time, that really we're driven to have sex for about a week out of the month. It was like, oh my God, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with me then, because we're being shown everywhere else. It's like, you should be wanting to have sex at the drop of a hat at all times of the day, like your male counterpart. When our hormones, the way they rise and fall, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. The first, week we have this, we have our period, we have low energy. This is when the hormones are at their lowest. And then estrogen starts to pick up. Progesterone stays down. Estrogen picks up. And on day 12, we have this massive spike of estradiol in our body where it just shoots right up. That also, testosterone comes alongside it. And so now we've got testosterone and estrogen driven up. We get voluptuous with all that estrogen. Everything plumps up. Our pheromones change, and they're sending out that signal, hey, I'm about to be ripe here for the pickings. Testosterone is what makes you go out there and want to get it. It's that driving factor. Rather, estradiol is that gets your body prepped for sex. And it's your mucus changes, and everything starts to moisten up, and you are driven to go out and procreate at that time because guess what? Estradiol spikes and then it comes down. Progesterone comes up because we ovulate, the corpus luteum bursts, and now we're producing progesterone for the second half of our cycle. But that spike, ladies, is really important. It's not just about go and get sex and procreate. What happens is that estrogen, as it's rising and then it spikes, it's actually suppressing a tumor suppressing gene called P53. And then when it drops, it activates that P53, and then progesterone comes on board and makes it work even better. So that's a tumor suppressing gene. Hello, we all want this. And
What
that's
kind
a
of growth would we want to not
That's beautiful.
suppress?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the thing. So then people are like, okay, but progesterone comes in and it stops the or just calms that proliferation down that estrogen's creating. That estrogen spike and everything, it's creating that uterine lining. It's building it up. And then progesterone comes along, counterbalances that build. And then we have this cellular processes happening, and it's going to slough it off when we get our period and we go through this rejuvenation. But it's like, well, if we're in menopause or we're not having kids anymore, I don't need to be building my uterine lining. Why would I want this growth to be happening from all this estrogen? Like, isn't that bad? I mean, that's what's driving breast cancer is proliferation, right, of the cancer cells. So you think, well, I don't want that. And I don't want uncontrolled growth in my uterus either. And well, guess what? It grows besides the uterine lining? Brain growth. We've got, it starts to have an impact on the brain and having this like incredible effect. Estradiol is so important for the brain. It helps grow our bones, osteoblasts. So does progesterone, but estrogen comes in. That's growth. It's stimulating growth of bones.
Is that? I was going to say, is that part of brain fog for women in menopause?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because that, I mean, that was a huge one for me in menopause was brain fog. I thought I would never come back again. I was like, I'm gone. I just had a lobotomy.
Yeah. And it's scary because you think, oh,
I'm
getting Alzheimer's, I'm getting dementia. You start losing your words. You can't remember things.
Yes. You're like, I know that word. I know it's in there, but I can't get it to come out. It is.
Our brain is rich with estrogen.
You do find my
receptors.
iPhone and it comes from the fridge.
Find my
there you
iPhone.
go. Or you're talking on the phone, looking for your cell phone. I've done that.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it's brain, it's immune system, it's your bowels, it's your bones, it's your heart. We have estrogen receptors everywhere in our body. It's not just the uterus. So growth isn't bad, and we have to stop thinking that it's bad. Uncontrolled growth is bad. Right. So if you don't have progesterone coming on board in that second half of your cycle, or let's say which we'll get into, but it can also be caused by too much progesterone. If you're using it every day and you're going to suppress this estrogen, you're also going to start suppressing progesterone, and I'll tell you why. But basically, we want that growth, but we want to control that growth, because if it's not controlled, that's when the endometriosis, uterine cancer, breast cancer can get out of control, weight gain, etc., estrogen dominance, and then too much proliferation.
Okay.
And so we need that progesterone, but we also need the growth. And here's what else happens. When that estradiol spikes and it's coming up like that, it's also upregulating its own receptors as well as progesterone receptors. And so when we start to produce the progesterone, these receptors are now super healthy. They're upregulated and they're waiting for progesterone. So if we now take this into menopause And the standard of care for HRT is estrogen every single day and progesterone every single day. In high doses, usually too. Like we're sometimes with progesterone, right? I just had somebody this morning tell me she's on 400 milligrams of oral progesterone. Too much. It's too much.
And testosterone too, right?
And testosterone. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But very few practitioners, well, I shouldn't say that. It's getting more and more popular. It's almost like, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself, is that we're androgenizing women. So we have these testosterone clinics doing pellets, and this is causing really high amounts of testosterone, which is not natural in a woman's body. And they're trying to get the sex drive to come back. And a lot of the time that's not what it is. It's actually that deficiency of estradiol that's causing the low sex drive in menopause. So, but yes. And then you have the other opposite end of the spectrum where a lot of doctors won't, especially primary doctors, are like, I'm not going to give you testosterone. You're a woman.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like in Canada, oh, you are so hard pressed to find somebody to get you testosterone as a woman. Almost impossible. Almost impossible.
Wow. And the drive, the just like what you were talking about, that a woman's sex drive is not meant to be testosterone driven. So like if you're just giving that as like an Advil for a headache, you know, testosterone for low sex drive without considering the peaks and the valleys and the rhythm of the woman's body, then it's just
testosterone is so important, and I feel like it's like we don't give it enough, but then when we do give it, it seems like they're overdosing it, and women are wanting to go higher and higher, thinking that will be the answer to the increased sex drive, which if it's high enough, yeah, sure, it's going to probably increase your sex drive, but then you're going to grow a beard, and you're going to grow a clitoris, and you're going to have hair loss on your head. And that ain't pretty. And then that happens almost across the board. As soon as we see those levels get up high, then we get the reports back of, okay, I'm losing my head hair. I've had women say they can't walk because their clitoris is so engorged.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We're not trying to transition to be a man. And so we got to be very careful. We're not supposed to have those high levels of testosterone. And women will be like, oh, but I feel so good. I'm like, yeah, I bet you do when your testosterone's at 300. I said, that's what it's unfair. That's what a man feels like. That's why they want to have sex all the time.
I was going to say, it feels like the Viagra solution for women, right? Because so it's like give testosterone so your sex drive comes back.
Yes. Yeah.
But not looking at really what would naturally bring it back. Yeah.
I see estrogen working better for that. For if a woman loses it in menopause, the estrogen tends to be the thing that brings it back and resensitizes things. Testosterone definitely helps, but in different ways. Yeah.
Do you think, do you look at testosterone really for the muscle? Because we lose a lot of muscle too. So do you look at it that way for that aspect of it? It would seem really more appropriate there, not for sex drive.
Yeah, but once again, estradiol is even more important for muscle and protein synthesis than testosterone, and a lot of women don't know that.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and so both are very important. Testosterone, I see really helping with energy and really giving women the go get 'em attitude. I always say it kind of gives you your lady balls. Go after it, it does. It helps you not to be passive, and it helps you to, and if you're in a job where, like my job where I'm running a big company and I'm working, testosterone really helps me in my job to really go after things and get stuff done.
And so if you think about it, because it spikes naturally right before ovulation, right? And that gives you the lady balls to say no to the wrong candidate. Yeah. Where you might be passive otherwise, but then you're getting this, no, I'm saving this egg for the right, Navy SEAL to swim by.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for the right Navy SEAL to come swim by.
You're a nurse. What's the feeling you associate with going to the mailbox and seeing that notification that says your license is up for renewal in 90 days? Do you go, yes? Or, oh, right? Why? I mean, it's not like they're hard to get. You have 2 years and there's so much free stuff out there. And yet we drag ourselves across the finish line, kicking and screaming, because they suck. They're boring and antiquated, and the delivery mechanism is inconvenient. And the thing is, if you're a nurse, we love to learn. We're always listening to podcasts and audiobooks and YouTube videos because we're just curious. But we have to pick through this pile of crap so that we can remain a nurse. Well, we created RNegade.pro to change that. We wanted nurses to be able to get credit for the stuff that they're naturally inclined to do anyway. It starts with a podcast. And then we're creating courses, and we want everything we do to feel like what you're naturally doing. The research shows that that's how we learn and retain best. Check it out. Pick one. See what you think. So maybe when you go to the mailbox next time and get that notification, you'll have that, yes, because they're already done.
Yeah, I could see testosterone playing, a big point in the selection process too.
Yeah.
So
yes.
gives you that little oomph to say, no, not you.
Not you.
Yeah.
You're not worthy. It's the worthy hormone.
It's the worthy hormone. I love it. Yeah, a lot of women will find like energy will really pick up. I find it actually makes me happier, testosterone. Like I'm in a better mood. And it does help with my sex drive. It does help with muscle recovery and muscle building. So it does do all those things. It's still it's an androgen. Yeah. So it is really important. It's very breast protective. It's brain protective. So there's many different things. Bone. It can also help with all three of those hormones. All help with bone, which women really need to pay attention to. I mean, that's no joke. I think that we dismiss osteoporosis and osteoarthritis a lot, and we shouldn't. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
so
death rates for breaking a bone are very high.
So Karen Martel, how do we mimic nature as close as possible with these many different hormones and derivatives?
We want our hormones, and we want our hormone receptors to act optimally when we're on HRT. And so how do we do that? And that's by cycling, because if you use progesterone every single day, you will start to suppress estrogen receptors. And now your estrogen's not going to work as well, which means your progesterone's not going to work as well. Because remember, estrogen helps to upregulate progesterone receptors. So what we'll hear is, oh, I felt amazing on my HRT for the first year, for the first 6 months. And then suddenly I'm not feeling it anymore. I feel like I need more. Maybe it's because you're not cycling, you're not getting the most out of that HRT that you could be getting. And I always like to follow this with HRT is very individualized. I'm going to talk about the benefits of cycling hormones, but I want to remind everybody, because people freak out. People are like, oh, well, I'm on a static dose and maybe I shouldn't be. And I got to go talk to my practitioner. And it's like, whoa down. It's same with the bias thing. Well, I'm on all this estradiol. Maybe I shouldn't be in it. It's like, do you know how many thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of women are on static dosed HRT every single day, bias, progesterone daily, and they're thriving and they're doing great. Yeah. So we have to remind ourselves of that.
It just runs in parallel. It's like some people can just eat sugar cookies and high fructose corn syrup and they don't become insulin insensitive. And so it's kind of the math. It's the same thing. You're talking about your receptors becoming desensitized to estradiol and all those other hormones, just like some people's receptors don't get desensitized to insulin. And other people get diabetes. So it's kind of, that makes a lot of sense. It's just math.
Yes. Yeah. It is. And it's so always remember that. And what I always recommend is, if it's not working for you, or if what I'm saying, it's like it connects with you and you're like, this makes sense to me. Because when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And I still research both sides, like that estriol. I researched both sides. I had a great conversation. I had like a debate on my podcast with, two that were for it, two against it, of these HRT practitioners. So I'm always open to learning and for somebody to change my mind. But the more research I did and the more I looked into the cycling of hormones and what hormones we're using, it just, to me, it's like that makes way more sense. And I would like to follow Mother Nature as closely as possible.
Sure. Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yes. Okay.
We're meant to live in conjunction with nature.
Yeah.
Our bodies are tied to it. I mean, even anybody can just see that from the change in the seasons, right? Like, I think everybody can identify it there. You see how your body, mind changes during the cycles of nature. So we're meant to live in conjunction with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been doing all this, a little side note, I've been doing research around melatonin, and how the increase of melatonin in the winter months suppresses estrogen. For fertility purposes. That was the biological reason our bodies did this. It was the sign to the ovaries, because we have melatonin receptors on our ovaries. It was the sign of, oh, it's winter. Now is not a time to get pregnant. Thyroid function goes down, which has a lot to do with fertility. Estrogen goes down, which has a lot to do with fertility. And melatonin comes up, and it has this teeter-totter effect on the hormones. And I thought, oh, that is just like, the body is phenomenal. I just think it's phenomenal.
It
But,
is.
okay, so there's many.
Snuggle up in the cold and get pregnant in the winter, but don't deliver in the winter.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
I picture us in caves. It's like,
right?
I don't want to have sex with you. It's the dead of winter. No, thank you. That's what I'm not getting out of my fur.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating study, though. Like, if your genome hails from like the Mediterranean, where it doesn't get that cold, like it gets cold, or even south of or like around the equator.
Yeah.
Are the offspring kind of always, they're always pumping out the offspring, no pun intended. But then like in the extremes against the equator, do most of the births happen? I mean, it happens in like, look at grizzly bears,
Yeah.
It's a rare grizzly bear that they're not pregnant while I don't know. I'm talking out of my butt because I don't even know if that's true, but it just makes sense. This is more common sense porn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right.
Okay. So
we digress.
We got static. And then the next level up is just simply, should we just cycle the progesterone and leave it there? And a lot of our patients in our clinic that we see, that's what they want to do. And they're only willing to take it that far because they don't want to mess around with their hormones every other day and the levels of it and trying to mimic the cycle. And they're like, no, forget it. Give me a static dose of estradiol every day and we'll cycle your progesterone, which to me, it's like, I think that's great. I see it working great. Women feel awesome that we get their estradiol to a level that gives them protection. And so we want to get that estradiol up, which not having progesterone in every single day helps us to get that estrogen up. Not using bias also helps. So we want to get the levels to like 65 picograms, between 65 and 100 is kind of where we see that bone, brain, heart protection start happening. Sometimes a little bit higher, like a little bit higher of estradiol is shown to like volumize certain parts of the brain. But we need to get it up to that dose. And so a lot of practitioners don't, they keep it at a very low dose. So if we're getting estrogen up that high and then we're cycling progesterone, a lot of women will start to get a period in menopause or continue. If they start HRT in menopause, perimenopause, they'll just continue cycling. It'll be a faux period. It doesn't make you fertile. That's long gone usually at that point, but you'll get a withdrawal bleed because you're not using progesterone every day. And so some women are like, no, don't want a period. No. But remember, we want to start thinking of the period as a sign of health.
Yeah.
It's not something to be feared. And when we have a withdrawal bleed, it tells us our estrogen's high enough. As long as we're not bleeding out, right? We want to have a very light period, and it is nothing like it was in your cycling years when you're fertile. You don't have PMS. I've been doing this for years. There's no PMS. There's no sore breasts. There's just a very light period for a couple of days, and then it's gone.
Every month?
Every month. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the odd
Okay.
woman won't. She still won't bleed, even though her estrogen's high enough and her progesterone's high enough, etc. We'll still have the odd woman that won't have a withdrawal bleed, but a lot of women will. And so you have to be okay with that and not panic, because a lot of women are like, what? I have a period. Oh my God, I'm 57 and I'm just had a period. So that can be really freaky for some women, but it's not a freaky thing as long as it's in that normal range. We don't want, a period every week or every 2 weeks. We want it every 30 days or 28 days or whatever it is, because we're cycling that progesterone, you're going to have a withdrawal bleed. In the menopause myth, they talk a lot about this. And so that's one way of doing cycling, is just simply let's cycle the progesterone so that these receptors between estrogen and progesterone do better. We use estrogen daily because naturally we do produce estrogen every day. And we even use testosterone every day. Like we produce it every day. So testosterone can stay the same, estrogen can stay the same, but we just cycle that progesterone. Then we go to the next step up, which is let's peak it. Let's give our body the peaks. Now, there's no research on this. All we know is that what it's doing for us as cycling women, these peaks that we see of progesterone and estradiol that happen in the cycle, and how that relates to the P53 enzyme, as well as that proliferation and the receptors, and how it's, bumping up receptors and bringing down receptors. And it's like this beautiful orchestration between the two of them. We can only go by that. We can only go by, this is why we do it when we're cycling, not just for fertility, but for these other purposes.
Right.
But there's no research that shows, okay, if a woman's cycling her HRT and giving these peaks on day 12 and day 21 of the cycle, is that better? We don't have anything versus like the group that's on static low dose HRT. Fortunately, there's just, they don't spend money on us women on these things. They just don't. It's terrible.
What are you finding anecdotally though from talking to women?
Anecdotally, so we have many of our clients and members that are interested in doing the peaks. And so that would look like day 12, you're going to triple your estradiol HRT just for one day. So whatever your main dose is, you're going to triple it day 12. And then come day 21, you're going to triple your progesterone, because we have a peak of progesterone on day 21 of the cycle. And then at the end of the cycle, you're dropping them both in half. And then that induces the period. So mini cycle, right? We're getting
So
these
it's not that complicated. It's not like,
Yeah.
No, but then there is one above that called the Wiley protocol, or physiologic restoration, which is what Maria and Kristen do.
Okay.
Is physiologic restoration. This is changing your dose every couple of days, and they are using physiological amounts to mimic how much progesterone and estrogen we would be producing as a 21, 25-year-old female in her ideal health state.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, okay, so normally we're talking what I was just talking about, maybe we'd have a menopausal woman on 1 milligram of estradiol a day. She's going to triple it on day 12 and take 3 milligrams. Progesterone, she's going to be 200 milligrams a day, and then maybe we're going to triple it on that day 21.
Yeah.
In the Wiley program physiologic restoration, we're going up to, your starting base dose is 10 milligrams of estradiol a day.
Wow.
And then it's going up. And so this is like much, much higher levels, and you're changing it every 3 days, and you're applying it twice a day transdermally.
oh, wow, transdermally.
Much more complicated,
Yeah,
right? So a lot of women are like, oh, no.
It's too much work. Yeah.
Too much work. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of women that is when they felt their best on HRT, is when they switched to doing that. And so once again, individualized. Some women need those high doses. They need that mimicking of the whole menstrual cycle to feel optimized on their HRT. So where they feel like their brain and their body and everything is functioning optimal. And so it's a really great option. It's a great option to have. Do we all need to be doing this? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd take a little bit of bleeding and complexity baggage to get my brain back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I'm thinking women who did nothing through menopause. If you did nothing and you're at the tail end, you're postmenopausal,
Yeah.
do you think it would be appropriate for that audience who never did anything, and maybe that's a good solution for them? I don't know.
It could be.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful. I mean, you'd have to start very, very low with
Yeah.
your dosing if you've been without HRT for a long time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a good question then. So then you would want to see people doing some form of HRT before you went into this as a
Yes.
solution potential. Okay. Okay. Good.
I would think so. I mean,
Okay.
a Wiley protocol practitioner would say otherwise, but I know that the longer we're without HRT, the more these receptors are like it's like they get more, there's more of them and they're more sensitive because they're looking for those hormones. And so you go dump in a bunch of estrogen, you are going to be very estrogen dominant for a period of time before your body adjusts and those receptors adjust. And so we have to be very careful. So any woman that's been without HRT and she's well into menopause,
Yeah.
then the approach should be very low, very slow, and you slowly titrate up. And then you would basically go, okay, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And then you could look at doing a higher dosed cyclical approach if they weren't 100% yet. But once again, it's individualized.
Yeah, I'm getting the feeling that it's like how the individual feels or whatever, whether it's static, whether it's HRT, or whether it's Wiley protocol, the way the individual feels trumps any dogma that any of those, any of the.
No.
Well, that's my next. Is there dangers? Is there things that you don't know that could be dangerous, even though you're feeling great, like the testosterone thing you were talking about? Like they feel great, but it's not how it's supposed to be.
And because women will take that then and say, and I hear this often, well, I went through menopause, I never had a hot flash, never gained weight, I feel great. I'm not going to use HRT. And so sometimes, yes, it's important to go by symptoms, and we want every woman to have no symptoms and to feel amazing. That's always the goal.
Sure.
But that can sometimes be a detriment if she doesn't have symptoms and she feels good. Is that right? Or and it's just like a small baby static dose of estrogen or Biest. Guess what? It gets rid of hot flashes, it gets rid of vaginal dryness, helps with the mood. So if somebody's just got those kind of little naggly, very common symptoms of menopause, and they take this, 0.5 milligrams of estradiol and progesterone every day, and they're like, oh, all my symptoms are gone, I feel great. But then you look at their levels and their estradiol is at 20. Well, now we know she doesn't have bone protection. She doesn't have brain protection. She doesn't have, she doesn't have those things because you can't see that.
Yeah.
Right? You can't feel these things a lot of the time. You can't feel your bones deteriorating until they break.
I mean, it goes back to testing, I think, right? Because people see, oh, there goes the thumb. People see things on the internet and they're like, oh, I should go do that. I should go take that. And we buy things and we just go through the process and we never have anybody analyzing what's going on in our own bodies.
Yes, yes. And I think it really has to be both things coming together, because some doctors will say, well, we don't need to test you, you're in menopause, just here's your hormones. And then we have the opposite end where it's like, well, your levels look fine. But then there's this woman who's like in tears. She feels like crap. She's 50 pounds overweight. And the doctor's like, yeah, but you're good. Your levels are fine. They're where they should be. So you have to mix these together. We want to make sure you're at optimal levels for health and wellness on the inside, on all the organs. We want everything to be functioning properly. And we know from research that things need to get to a certain place in order to really reap the benefits of that HRT. But then on the other side, it's like you could have great levels. You could have 75 picograms of estradiol, but you could still have brain fog and vaginal dryness and emotional instability and depression. And so maybe that person, we need to start cycling. We need to get those levels quite a bit higher in order for her to have elimination of all those symptoms.
I love that. I love that.
So it doesn't require the other thing that I like, over testing, like someone who's, so is it a matter of once you kind of dial it in, then does it always require tweaking and, adjusting the dials? How often do you recommend that people get tested for their levels? Like, what is because over testing is like over supplementing, is like over methylating, people, everything can be overdone. So what is it that once you establish a baseline, so say you're going through perimenopause, you're starting to get irregular, you establish a baseline 21 days after your supposed missed period, right? And that's where you test. And then what happens after that? How do you?
We typically like to do a 3-month follow-up test, because once you start using the HRT, it takes about 3 months for them to work, to see how they're going to work together, right? Because progesterone and estrogen and testosterone, they have these actions, and they all work synergistically together. And so you have to give it 3 months to see what is it going to do and where are they going to land. And then you have that like 3-month tweak where it's like, okay, let's get this a little bit higher. We want this a little bit lower. We want blah, 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 blah. And then after that, we see that usually it's every 6 months, and that's required to get if you're doing prescribed hormones. Now, if you're doing over-the-counter hormones, then, that's up to that person. But really at that point, like if you got to a good level, therapeutic levels in your body, and you feel good and you're like, I ain't messing with this anymore, this is great. Right. And it's been 6 months and you still feel amazing, well, then maybe you don't test because you feel good. It's like, what's the point? Maybe once a year, then you go and get your hormones tested just to see that, make sure everything's where it should be. Or if you feel a change, because things can happen, right? Your stress levels go up. Now you don't feel your hormones as well. Yeah. Yeah, maybe you're starting to exercise more and you need, I'm losing my earbuds. Maybe you need some more testosterone, because you're working out harder, or just there's many things. Seasonal changes. Once again, seasonally, like we see people needing more thyroid medication come wintertime. And, if they're in a place where it's actually cold. So there are these fluctuations that can happen. But I really encourage women, get to know your body and don't be afraid to biohack yourself. The beauty of hormone replacement therapy is if you're like, oh, my brain is off today. This morning, I have a full day of talking today. So I was like, I am dosing myself up with some estrogen, like extra estrogen this morning for Karen. I even put some pregnenolone on the brain yesterday. Like, just on my gosh, before going to bed.
I am sold after what you just said. Like, I love to play with myself. I say, like, just like I will, and that is not,
let's clarify.
That's not because I feel like I'm stuck in ovulation. I love to experiment and stuff like that. Yeah. And this feels like a playground to me, especially like there's so much weird shizzle going on in my life right now. Like, I have been away from my kids for a month. It's like, so this constant background of like fires going, metaphorical fires that are waiting for me in California, taking care of my dad, put the rocket science, like, and I'm horny right now. It's so interesting to me. Like, what is going on? So, and when you said that you can kind of adjust the dials, because to me, all of my pregnenolone is being prioritized for cortisol because I've got this constant, I'm getting it done. So why is this happening? So I love that. And I love that you can tweak it. And you just kind of dispelled my anti-over testing thing. Like, if I could figure, like, I'm really curious what's under the hood right now, because none of the symptoms I'm having make sense to me.
Yeah. And I think you've had a fluctuation probably of estrogen. And that's why it's being brought up. Like, your sex drive has come up.
Mothering my father.
Like, there we go.
On it. Yeah.
You never know, right? And the beauty of HRT or hormones is they're out of your body fast. So if you take too much, or you're like, okay, I'm going to play around with my dosing, and you don't feel well, back off and go back to where you were doing. And 24 hours, 48 hours later, it's out. I mean, within 24 hours, really.
Is the half-life of most of like the
very
estradiol,
like 6 to 8,
progesterone?
6 hours. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's fun. That's fun too.
I mean, it'll still stay within the tissues, and so you'll still have some, but the bulk of it, that's why they think that we should split HRT dosing. Like with estrogen, for instance, we should do morning and night. And because it runs out in 6 hours, a lot of it. So it's good to dose it twice. Progesterone, on the other hand, it's really great at nighttime for sleep, and it helps with sleep. So then we take it at bedtime, and that seems to be good. If a woman's having estrogen dominance, though, then maybe we'll dose it twice a day, night and morning, that progesterone. But don't be afraid to biohack yourself. Our hormones are fluctuating every day, all day.
Sure.
As cycling women. So to suddenly just dose yourself up on something, you're not harming anything.
Yeah.
Even like the other day, I couldn't sleep. My son was sick and he's coughing and I had anxiety, and I'm like, oh, and I'm not on progesterone days, but I have my progesterone cream and I just take a pump. I rub it on my chest. Boom, I'm asleep in 10 minutes.
And you know what,
That's
that also, I'm very conscious of your time and mine. And this was, I can tell you've done this before, because it was like a perfect, introduction, a little bit about all the things that you can do. And it just left me wanting more. There were times that I just felt like I was watching a Gaia documentary or something, just like listening intently. And you gave me the title, Don't Be Afraid to Biohack Yourself. Like there's going to be some version of that for the title.
Yeah.
I just love that. But this is a great launching pad for we'll use this as a pod club and then bring people in.
Sure.
This is just
I love
for
it.
nurses, well, for any woman, but I've been a nurse for 30 years and I'm just learning. You'd think that you would get at least a little introduction, but no, it's because of the study. I remember my mom just cutting herself off, and all of those women and nurses, the biggest personnel surface area of the healthcare system, for them to know this stuff and just be able to go, just go over here, if they're not getting the answers that they need to be comfortable for the rest of their lives. And there's so much great about menopause that I've been reading. You could not become a druid until you went through it, in the olden days. But there's so much magic about it, and we're just taught to look at it as like a disease and that sensitivity you get as a woman. But what if you could just sail through it? I'm kind of excited. I mean, I feel like it's such a blessing that I was introduced to you and got to know you at this. It's not all about me, but it's really lucky that I'm getting to know you at this exact time in my life. So
yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So thank you
thank
so
you for
much
having
again
me.
for your time. This was like a perfect arc. I really appreciated it.
I love
Wendy,
having
well done.
conversations with you guys. Wendy, well done on your first
grounding,
podcast
asking good
premiere.
questions.
Yeah, this is my premiere one for RNegade. So
all right. Thanks so much, Karen.
All right,
Wendy,
ladies.
Stay on so we can talk about her behind your back for a little bit.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Karen.
My favorite part about that whole thing was, well, I'm sure it's because she does this. She's done this so much before, but we're talking about cycling and she's like, this is the history. These are the problems with the history. This is how it started getting solved. And here's two other options. And it just went, and it's 11 o'clock, time to go.
Exactly.
I mean, that was just such a great arc and morsel and introduction to HRT and what was it called? The Wiley Protocol. I can't wait. Her introducing that as I can feel a rabbit hole coming on.
Yeah.
And
And it'll make for a great pod club like you're talking about. I mean, especially for nurses who aren't in women's health. Hell, maybe even for nurses who are in women's health practices and they have doctors that are still ignoring what could be done. So
well, just to correct the incorrect knowledge that we were all taught that this causes cancer and this is why you don't do it.
I mean, Karen, it's one of the reasons I never did HRT. I was too scared to do it because
misinformation.
Yes. Yes. And I was going through menopause. I started at 50. So, and then I was obviously perimenopausal before that. So I literally lost my period, I think January of the year I turned 50. And then I was just done. So it was, there was so much going on negativity about HRT.
Yeah.
So I never did it.
Well, Wendell, c'est moi, 50. Where did that period go? Oh, there it's back 2 weeks in a row. Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm stuck in ovulation or something. It's just like, what is going on?
I know, right?
This is one thing though. I am a kind of a anti too much looking under the hood, because I think if you're looking for something wrong, you'll always find something.
Sure.
But this seems like something that would be fun.
Yeah. And I think, like, again, in balance, right? I look at life as everything in balance is good, right? So you can get crazy about tests and the data. But I do think it's good to look at data, because we do, as a supplementation world, right? When you look at that world and what that's created, now everybody just goes out and buys supplements, and because they read one symptom of something and they're like, ooh, I should go do that. And like the whole testosterone thing, I should go take testosterone because that's going to raise my sex drive. Well, maybe you shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, could it do that? But then I just heard so can estrogen, right? So like maybe you should be doing estrogen because you don't have enough estrogen, and that's why your sex drive is.
Yeah. And you got me, that whole thing got me really curious, which I never looked it up, and it's not like me to not look something up, but that peptide, what is it? The P141?
Oh, PTI.
PT141.
PT141.
I never looked at the mechanism of action. Like, I wonder, because that made me, I tried that and it made me feel horrible. And you too.
I did too. Right. So
I wonder if it's like trying to squeeze something out of you that just isn't there anymore. But if you replace it and then use it,
Right. So again, that's a perfect example of you and I are like, ooh, I'll try that because it might help my sex drive. That's why I did it. I'm like, oh, maybe that'll help and I felt like crap and did not want to have sex at all. I'm like, oh no, I feel like shit.
Yeah.
So what's going on in my body that's not appropriate for me right now, because something else should be fixed first?
Yeah. It feels like there's something, maybe it acts on testosterone and you just don't have any. So it's just kind of trying to squeeze dust out of something.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there. And that's
so
why
then you can see we're testing.
So it was turning on something, and I'm totally, folks, if we keep include this bit, you're going to hear me sound like an idiot for about 30 seconds. It was trying to squeeze something out of like a bucket when that bucket's empty, but it's still squeezing it. So you probably felt like I should be doing something, but nothing's happening, like.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
and honestly, it made me feel like that part of your mind that's like that you wanted to take something that was going to make this romantic evening or afternoon for you and me and my husband, and it didn't. And then I felt inadequate again. I was like, see, like,
Aww.
you know what I mean? It messes with your ability to figure out, because we just don't know a little bit of data, right? I might just need a little bit of data. And instead I was like, see, there's nothing out there for me that's going to bring my sex drive back.
Yeah. It's obvious to me, and I could be wrong, but it feels, my intuition is that it's trying to stimulate something that you don't have.
Yeah.
So the stimulation gets there, but the substance that was supposed to be stimulated, maybe that's a hormone. And if it works on guys, it's probably testosterone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's look it up. We'll
Let's
find out.
do it.
We'll add it to the questions for Pod Club.
Okay.
Okay.
I like it.
Renegades.